What is social justice? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Recently, I was asked to give a talk on social justice and what exactly it was and try to understand it a little bit better. And so I thought I would adapt that talk into a little video to help my viewers to understand. So this is that talk adapted for my philosopher audience. I will say right off the bat, just so you know, when we use the term social justice, when I'm using the term social justice, the people that I'm talking about today, the theory that I'm talking about today is different than it would have been about 10 years ago. So starting about 10 years ago, this term social justice was adapted or taken over maybe by a totally different type of person, type of ideology. So before that, it was basically used to mean something like the welfare state, something like that. John Rawls ish kind of stuff. That was the territory of the progressive liberals. So nowadays, when you talk about social justice, you're not really talking about liberalism in that sense. You're talking about like a whole different type of ideology. This is what is now disparagingly referred to as wokeness, right? This is, some would refer to this as, they point out that critical theorists would adhere to this kind of social justice. Some would say social Marxism would be the proponents of social justice. Whatever is the case, they all hold certain tenets in common. I'm going to say that they hold 4 tenets in common. I do think that there is a debate about what the actual beginnings of this are. Is it postmodern or is it Marxist? And I think that there's a mixture there. I'm not going to get into that yet, today. But I do think that there's a clear influence on both sides. And I think it depends especially on what type of social justice you're talking about. But again, we'll set that to the side for a little bit, and we'll talk really about what are these 4 tenets that I think that are the mainstay of social justice. And these aren't exhaustive, but I think that these are the big ones. Have you ever wondered, why is it so bad to misgender somebody? So much so that in 2021, a man named David McConnell, street preacher, was arrested for misgendering somebody in London. He was sentenced to 12 months of, I think it was like 12 months of community service, and it was eventually overturned because they couldn't prove that he intended to cause distress. But it's interesting. You could be arrested for calling people names. That is something that it's such a bad thing. Why is it such a bad thing? Or when I was a kid in the 90s, it was a sign that you were not racist to be colorblind, to be quote unquote colorblind, meaning that you would say that, I don't see your skin color when I see you, I just see the person behind the skin color. Nowadays, that's considered actually a racist thing. Why would that be the case? This is because of the first pillar of social justice, which is that we are foremost a collection of socially constructed classes. And those classes include things like race, gender, transgender, queer, disability, fat, religion. All of those things go into defining who we are. So these things take priority over our humanity and take priority over our individuality as well. So when you look at a person, it's that that person is first Latino. I'm going to use myself as an example. Is primarily Latino, male, cisgender, heterosexual, all those things, and then is an individual and a human. Like, that's what makes that person a human, and that's what makes that person an individual, and not the other way around. It's not that that person is an individual first, and then here are some classes that happen to go along with them being an individual and being a human. So these classes are more important than your humanity, and they're more important than your individuality. They define what you are, so you can't get away from them, right? It's not like you can say, well, I'm Latino, but okay, but I'm really like this. I'm not defined by my Latino-ness. No, you are Latino, and that's what defines you. So this is why it's such a big deal to misgender somebody or say that you don't see their race. It's because if that's what defines you, then saying that you deny somebody's gender or saying that you deny somebody's race or don't see somebody's race is basically saying that you deny or don't see that person, because that's what that person is. That person is defined as those individual classes. So that's the first pillar. Now, consider this following quote from Ibram X. Kendi, who is one of the biggest names in social justice. He says, "There is no such thing as race-neutral policy. There are only racist policies which produce inequitable and unjust outcomes, and anti-racist policies which produce equitable and just outcomes." So now think about that. What he's saying is, if a policy in any way produces an inequitable outcome, it can't be the fault of anything else except for racism, right? Or, genderism or sexism or something like that. It's got to be the fault of the policy being discriminatory, and it can't be the fault of anything else. And as Thomas Sowell has pointed out, there has never been a policy ever in history that has ever led to totally equitable outcomes. So what Ibram X. Kendi has basically claimed here is there has never been a non-racist policy at all in history. How can somebody make such an incredible claim? Well, it's because of the second pillar of social justice, which is that disparities exist between people of different classes that can only be the result of injustices. Now, the fact that disparities exist is uncontroversial, right? It's just an empirical fact. You can just look at the numbers and they're there. The controversial part of the claim is that these disparities result from injustices. So why think such a thing? Because social justice theorists believe that reality is a zero-sum power game where there are winners and there are losers. And so basically they look at reality as, the only way for you to get ahead is for you to push someone else behind. That we are all just on the same level, and there's no way for you to go ahead just by yourself. You have to push someone else back, or you have to take from someone. Here's another example is looking at wealth. They don't believe that you can create wealth. They only believe that you can take wealth from somebody else, and that's how you can have more wealth than somebody else. Otherwise, it would just be everybody has the exact same amount of wealth. So they look at it as a zero-sum power game. Now consider the definition of racism that is found here on Canada's website. So pretty crudely here, but I'll just summarize it. It basically says, if you don't think you're a racist, that's racist. How could you come to such a claim? It seems so audacious, and yet it's something that's found on the website of Canada, right? Canada itself, the government, the country, has this as their definition of racism. Also consider Darren Brady, who was arrested for causing anxiety by posting the following picture of a swastika made of pride flags. Now, the reason he posted this was because he was questioning the overuse of pride flags in Pride Month in somewhere in England. England has been arresting people all kinds of places for social justice purposes. But so he was arrested because he was causing anxiety, because he was calling into question the use of pride flags, right? So how can these things happen? What is the meaning behind all this? It's the third pillar of social justice, which is that calling any of this stuff into question is an injustice itself. So if you question that you're a racist, you say, I don't think I'm a racist, that makes you racist. If you say that you disagree with social justice, that makes you racist, sexist, whatever it would be. And not only that, but it causes harm, they would say. For example, with the swastika flag, it causes anxiety for you to ask these questions. In fact, this is one of the reasons why, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, why social justice theorists of today do not believe in freedom of speech anymore, because they believe that speech can be harmful. They believe that if you hear something that you dislike, that is mentally harming you. And so they think that we should not allow somebody to speak. So they'll actually go out and do stuff like try to knock off your bullhorn that you're speaking through. That's been happening, or trying to steal your amplifier, or steal your posters, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the third pillar. What about this? I'm sure you've heard the phrase "silence is violence," or you may have felt pressured to be an ally to something. What is the thinking behind silence is violence? If you don't actually speak out for social justice, if you aren't an ally for people in one of these protected classes, then you are yourself a bad person. What is the thinking behind there? That's the fourth pillar of social justice. It is morally imperative for anybody on the positive side of one of the disparities to work to eliminate it, to spend all their time. Not every single moment of their day, but you're going to have to spend the rest of your life working to eliminate any kind of benefit that you might have over anybody else in a different class. Because remember, any benefit that you have is due to an injustice. Remember, like Ibram X. Kendi said, any kind of policy that resulted in any kind of inequality was because of an injustice, because of something racist or something like that. So that anything that you have that is different than other people, you only got it because of something that you did, or something your family, your ancestors did that was unjust. And for that reason, it's on you to rectify that, to eliminate that benefit that you have, to equalize everything. It's a little sad because there's no social justice nowadays has been referred to as a type of a religion, and by guys like John McWhorter. And if that's the case, it's a little sad. There's no room for atonement in this religion. If that's the case, there's no real forgiveness. You just are guilty by being a member of a class. Like if you're white, then you're going to be guilty for life, even if you pay all the reparations that they're, it doesn't matter. You are guilty for life, and it's good. It's a good thing that you pay the reparations and that you say you're sorry and that you bow down and whatever you're going to do. But it can never make up for what your ancestors did. And you didn't even do it, right? Your ancestors did it. So yeah, sucks to be you. But how are we going to go about achieving pillar number 4? Well, first of all, consider this following quote, again from Ibram X. Kendi: "The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." So in other words, discriminatory practices. The only way that we can rectify this situation is to discriminate. It's to have discriminatory hiring practices, discriminatory enrollment practices in universities. So what this means is that, for example, in universities, you should have an enrollment that reflects the demography, right? You should have 50-50 male to female. You should have a ratio of race that reflects, here's where things get a little bit fuzzy, either your locale or the United States. Which one? I don't really know. And San Diego State, I know they were really upset about there not being enough Latinos because there were so many Latinos in the community. But I don't know. Usually people are worried more about representing the United States. So whatever black, white, Latino, Inuit, you should have that proportion reflected in your enrollment at the university. In hiring practices, you should have a diversity, equity, inclusion office, and they should hire people based, again, on ratios. So discriminatory practices, indoctrination is another practice. So you can see this throughout all the schools, basically. Social justice has taken over. There is all these ideas have been inundated into, even at the elementary school level, into his teaching practices. And that's because the teachers' credentialing programs have all sort of been taken over by social justice theorists, and they train the teachers to go out and go teach these kinds of things. But also you see this in a workplace training, so diversity training and different jobs, in almost every kind of job, there is some kind of diversity training. So this will be reflective of the social justice theories. Some other strategies for getting rid of the disparities that are more controversial. One is the dissolution of the nuclear family. And this is something that it may not sound like this is all conspiracy theorists, but this is actually like stuff that, for example, the BLM movement was aiming to do. The idea is, each family unit is sort of like its own kingdom, and the children are off limits to the outsiders, and so they can't be indoctrinated if the family unit has got a stranglehold on them. So that's like a bad thing for people who want to change the way everybody else is thinking. And there's also an inequality often when it comes to the husband and the wife. So a lot of times, especially because when they have children, the wife has to stay home to have the children. And that gives the husband a leg up in his work because, he doesn't have to take that time off to have children. So there becomes this inequality in childbearing. Another thing is the dissolution of police and jail. And that is because there is a disparity amongst people who are arrested, classes of people that are arrested. And then Marxism is a goal of a lot of social justice theorists. They look at it as that will equalize everything, all the disparities will be gone, and then we'll have everything solved just by Marxism. So for a lot of them, I would say like they look at the racial tensions and the different warring factions within the United States as opportunities. They look at this as opportunities for a revolution, a cultural revolution in bringing forth the eventual Marxism that they're looking for. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that there is a vast difference between this social justice and the social justice of 10 years ago that we were talking about earlier. So a lot of the values of that social justice, of the progressive liberal social justice, are gone. And so I thought I'd list some of them out. The first one is the live and let live value, right? It's no longer acceptable for you to believe what you believe and me to believe what I believe, and then we just sort of like let each other do our own thing. Now it is imperative for, in the social justice theorist ideas of today, for you to change your mind. If you don't believe what a social justice theorist believes, you need to change your mind, and they will not stop because that's just the way. Tolerance is no longer a virtue. It's not a good thing anymore. So I hear people arguing like, "Oh, this is supposed to be the tolerant left, isn't it?" No, that's not what social justice believes anymore. The tolerant left was the progressive liberals. They were the ones who were all about the tolerance. And I'm not saying that they were necessarily tolerant people themselves. I think that they could be very hypocritical in their tolerance. But I'm saying that the people today who are social justice theorists don't care about tolerance. That's not a virtue for them. Free speech is no longer a virtue. Again, if free speech causes harm, then they don't buy it. And really, any kind of disagreement with them, they consider not to cause harm. Individuality is not a virtue anymore. It's collectivity. It's all about the collective. And then freedom is also not a virtue. So like when you appeal to these kinds of things, these aren't things that are going to motivate a social justice theorist. They're not going to look at that and say like, oh, we lost some freedoms. Oh, no, right? That's not going to bother them. Now let's look a little bit deeper at those different pillars that we talked about that social justice theorists adhere to. The first one being that we are foremost a collection of socially constructed classes. Well, while there is a lot to say about this, I'm not going to get too deep into it. There's first of all the idea that we are socially constructed classes, that the classes are socially constructed, and that's not at all obvious. That it's not obvious that some of these classes aren't biological. For example, sex. Is our sex really socially constructed, or is it a biological construct? Is it due to our biology? But the big question mark, I think, is, are we foremost a collection of our classes? I think not. I think we are foremost humans and foremost individuals. I think when we evaluate a person, we evaluate them individually and not evaluate them as members of a race or as members of a sex or something like that. I'm Latino. Does that mean that I'm responsible for all the things Latinos have ever done? I hope not. I'm male. Does that mean that I'm responsible for all the things that males have done? I don't think so. Like, males have done great things and males have done bad things, and I've done none of those things. So I don't think we evaluate people based on those classes. And I realize that's not exactly what's happening in social justice, but it ends up being, I think, what happens. And I don't think that that's right. And then the second pillar is that disparities exist that are the result of injustices. When it comes to this, I think this is a hard question, because I think it's definitely the case that some of the disparities are caused by injustices, but I think also some disparities are not caused by injustices. And just pointing to disparities doesn't prove that they were caused by injustices. So there are a number of ways how you can show this. The first way is that a lot of times the injustices, so-called, that are pointed to are the result of just a univariate analysis of statistics. So what that means is you're looking at just one variable. So, for example, the wage gap in between men and women, the idea that women make like 77 cents to every dollar that a man makes. So Thomas Sowell has shown that if you account for other things like whether women are working at all, what sort of career they've chosen, and the number of hours they spend weekly in the office, eliminates almost completely the gender gap. So just looking at one variable is insufficient for determining whether there is actually going to be a disparity there in the first place. So that's definitely not sufficient to show that there's an injustice there. And there are other statistical problems that sometimes pop up. Sometimes people just get the statistics wrong. So, for example, the idea that blacks are being killed by police in tremendous numbers. That is just a rumor that's gone around that people actually believe. When you look at the numbers, police killings are about 1,200 per year of all people, and blacks are about 250 of that. And the proportion of that is 10% higher than the proportion of blacks in America. But when you factor in the variable of higher crime rates, then that disparity goes away too. Now, even having said that, makes me nervous because of the third pillar. Because I'm afraid that a lot of you guys are going to hear that and think that's racist. These things that you're saying are racist. When they're true facts, man. Like the third pillar is questioning any of this is an injustice. Questioning this is a racist thing to do. So if you say, I don't think this is racist, that's a racist thing to say. I'm sorry, but that's a joke. That is not philosophy. That is straight thought police. That is something that does not belong in serious talk. So it's one thing for us to say it is harmful when you are being pestered by somebody. When, like, for example, if I were to call you up in the middle of the night and call you names and constantly like tell you evil things about yourself, that's one thing. But if I question something that you claim is true, that is not harmful. I'm sorry, but it's not. It is, if you're wrong, if you're truly wrong, which you have to be open to being wrong. That's philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, you need to be ready to be wrong. I'm open to being wrong. You could prove me wrong. Go for it. I don't mind. But if you're not open to being wrong, you have no business in a serious philosophy world. And finally, is it morally imperative for us to spend all of our time to rectify these disparities? I do think so. I think we have, as a Christian, I think we have a duty to take care of the poor. I think that is an actual duty that we have. But do I think that we have a duty to equalize everything, to make everybody exactly equal? No, and I don't think that that's desirable or possible. I don't think we could do that even if we wanted to. And if we did do that, I think, I don't think we could do that because we're born with different abilities. We're born just differently. And those different abilities lead to different outcomes. Thomas Sowell actually goes into this and talks about all of the different variables that can go into your success in life. And a lot of them are amoral, things like just the geography, where you live, and just totally random things. Even where you were born and if you were born first in your family, like crazy things like that. You can't control those kinds of things. Nor do I think it would be desirable to try to equalize everything. I mean, I think it's desirable to help people and to help people to not be poor, to help people to gain wealth. I think that's a worthy thing, but I don't think it's desirable to force people to equality. I think that is something that leads, first of all, to poverty. And second of all, I think that's something that just takes away freedom. And I don't like either of those things. In any case, that is all I have for social justice. If you have any questions, I have so much we could talk about. So hit me up in the comments and I'd love to discuss. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Adios.